Welcome back to Dr. Todd's The Cost of Telling What You Survived. This series exists for a reason. There are writers who are trying to tell their story, and what they're experiencing is not writer's block. It is emotional exposure without support. And too many people are attempting to write through trauma without understanding what it requires of them mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually. That is where this conversation shifts because awareness without guidance leaves people feeling overwhelmed, and guidance without awareness leaves people unprepared. Today, we are continuing this conversation with Felicia Brookins. Felicia, this is where we move from simply recognizing the weight to understanding how to carry it without costing the writer their sense of self. So, when writers begin to feel the emotional weight of their story, what is the first thing you want them to understand before they decide whether to continue or to pause their writing?
When they begin to feel that emotional weight, what I would suggest to them is that they look at that as not so much as something that is going wrong inside of them or a wrong feeling, but to look at it as a way of this is supposed to be the way I feel. This is true. This is not something that's wrong with me. It's okay for me to feel this. And that it's exactly. They need to find out what is exactly making them feel this emotional weight too. It may be a memory. Maybe it's something that they've written has a special meaning or a triggering meaning for them. Or is this just the moment you're reliving as you write it? And are they overwhelmed by what happened or by what they've never processed? All of that is some things they need to ask themselves when they feel that emotional weight. First of all, this is not wrong. This is a true feeling. This is real. And so once you determine this is a real true feeling, nothing's wrong with me, then they begin to ask those themselves those questions. What's triggering this? What's causing this heaviness on me as I write?
That's so important, Felicia, because what I'm hearing is that many writers assume that if they're feeling heavy, that they're doing something wrong. And really, what I'm getting from you is it's not necessarily they're doing something wrong. Their body or their emotions are trying to communicate with them, and they've got to determine what it is that their body is trying to get them to understand. So, from your perspective, how do you help them distinguish between the necessary emotional work and then actual harm? Because there is a difference.
Well, first of all, they have to understand that it is important that they don't avoid it. Don't try to avoid it. Be aware of it. Address it, face it. They need to be able to name that emotion. Don't just say, well, this is something that's really, really hard for me, or I feel shame writing this, or I get really angry writing this. They need to name it. What exactly is this that's causing this issue? And then where in your body are you feeling it?
Mm-hmm.
When you write this, like, feel this emotion, does it just give you a really bad headache? Does your chest tighten up? What is going on? Where is it going on at? And then the next thing that they need to do, I think is really, really helpful, is to decide for themselves what their next step is going to be. Are they going to try to push through and continue writing? Are they going to try to shift to something else and maybe step back and just think it through and reflect on it? Or are they going to do, what we mentioned before, to pause, which is okay, to intentionally pause when I feel this heavy weight? It is okay, because when you pause, don't think of it as you just completely stopping. Think of it as a pause with a purpose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I intentionally pause. Why? Because I am feeling extremely anxious in my chest when I write this.
Well, Felicia, then that kind of gets me thinking about early indicators that a writer is maybe becoming emotionally overwhelmed and may need structured support rather than pushing through the process alone. So, how do you help the writer to understand that? And then to understand that they're at a place where it's not so much about the techniques of writing now. It's about the emotional support as they're implementing the techniques and then experiencing that physical or emotional reaction to what they're writing. So how do those are some early indicators, but how do we help them to navigate this overwhelmness that they're experiencing?
What I would suggest for them, first of all, would be that they see this as re experiencing something. You know, writing it may cause you to breathe deeply or exhale, inhale and exhale. Um, it may make your heart beat a little faster, but see that not as this scary moment that you're stepping into by writing this down and putting it out, publicly soon, but see it as okay, so I'm re experiencing this again. And so when I start to do that, maybe I need to get some support. Maybe I need to talk to somebody, not necessarily just go close myself off, not to say that you can't, but I would suggest that you get support, that you talk to somebody maybe that is familiar with it, or someone that has a compassion and a heart enough to hear out what you have to say and to help you process what it is that you're going through based on whatever that experience was that triggered you, that made you feel out of control or made you feel disconnected. Somebody that you can share how your body is reacting to what you're trying to write, because what you don't want is to walk away from your writing session feeling worse than when you started. So I would say support is really, really important at this time. Listen to your body, pay attention to the behavior. You may have thoughts about it that trigger you, but don't just think about, oh my God, I thought about this and this and this. How did your body react? And how did it affect your behavior once that occurred? Once you wrote that and came in contact with somebody else, was it still affecting you that maybe you snapped at them really quickly?
And that's so important, Felicia, because really, I'm really big on reflection. And what I'm hearing is, as writers, we have to be students of reflection, be it we're reflecting on the process that we're going through, but also how we are engaging with the materials that we are writing. And
Yes.
when we are present and in the moment and not a bystander, then we'll be able to determine how we need to position ourselves to support where we are at that moment in the writing and storytelling of our life, because we're telling our life, we're telling how we survive, and sometimes that is overwhelming, for lack of another word. It's very overwhelming. So being able to reflect on every aspect of the process sounds very important. Now, you also often talk about emotional boundaries in writing. What does that look like in practice for someone who has never been taught how to separate themselves from their story? Or think about it from this perspective, someone that doesn't know how to separate themselves from anything. So it doesn't have to just be their story. They can't separate themselves from work, from church, or organizations. What does that look like in practice when you're trying to help that person to separate themselves, to set that boundary about really how they're going to engage emotionally in what they're writing? Because I think, and I could be speaking out of turn, but I think there is a time to engage when you're telling your personal story. I think there is a time to engage in it, but I don't necessarily think that I personally should be engaged in it as Teresa the entire time that I'm writing, because I think if I am, I'm not going to be able to tell the story in a manner that's going to benefit other people. So, what is that boundary? How do you help them to practice boundaries when it comes to the writing of their story and what they survived?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned about, maybe I'm not able to, step into this space myself as Teresa and continue this, because before we even get to the emotional boundary part as it's building, the writer has to come to a point where they realize, you know what, I am losing my ability to just be an observer and writer of this story. And so I all of a sudden will become this incident or this triggering moment all over again. And so when that happens, that's when you have to start thinking about your emotional boundaries, because your writing, again, as we said yesterday, it should be a tool to help someone. And so it should be something that it helps you to express yourself on paper, but it should not consume you. And so if you feel that it's starting to consume you and you feel that you're losing the ability to maybe be neutral as far as writing it in a form that's going to help someone, then your emotional boundaries need to be set. That allows you to control access in a way, you could say. And so what I suggest is a few tips or a framework that I think would work very well when it comes to emotional boundaries. The first one is this thing that you call the container method. Okay, so with this container method, they can set a time limit, maybe 20 to 45 minutes that they need to kind of step back, or if they need to move forward in writing, they take that 20 to 45 minutes. Okay, this is when I am intentionally going to focus in on writing. I'm going to intentionally focus on a specific scene, not the whole, let's say this terrible thing happened to me. And so it was traumatic for me, but I'm not about to replay this entire thing. Just for 20 minutes, I'm going to focus on this little box, this little place of time, so that I don't get overwhelmed emotionally. Okay. And then when you are ready to finish, you deliberately finish that session. Don't just get up and just say, oh, I'm just done. I can't do it. Just walk away. Put it in a little box, in a little container. Take your little time. Focus in maybe on just how you were feeling maybe before this thing happened. What were you thinking? It makes it a lot easier for you emotionally to write it out. Okay. So also before you begin to write, you need to think about, what am I going to do once I finish this page or these 2 or 3 pages? Should I get up once I have intentionally ended it? And for my emotional sake, maybe go take a walk. Maybe I meditate. Maybe I'll even just go to my journal and write down my feelings about writing it. That too can be a form of emotional boundaries that you set for yourself. What do I do for myself so that I stay calm after something like this or as I'm going through it? Also, I would say when it comes to your writing, you may want to practice what I consider like a bit of a distance type technique. So when it comes to the distance type technique, what I'm saying there is, instead of you as an aspiring author just writing, I was hurt, da 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 da, you want to say maybe, I experienced this in this moment. Not just that I was hurt, but I experienced this. So it allows you still to have emotional space when you're writing, but it doesn't disconnect you from the truth of what happened. Because if you say I'm hurt, that can maybe cause some type of emotional, I'm trying to distance myself from this hurt so I won't feel it so much. But if you say this is what I experienced, then I'm still connected emotionally to that, and it's still the truth. Because you don't want your boundaries to block your stories, but you want them to help protect the person that is telling the story. You wanted to protect the storyteller. And another way I would also say is helpful when it comes to emotional boundaries is that you have to learn how to, I would say, ground yourself. Grounding techniques are good. So that is going to be, how you return back to the present. You're writing this, you're getting it all out, and all of a sudden you've traveled back down memory lane and it feels a little bit too close to you. How do you pull yourself back out of that if there's nobody around to come and get you out? You have to practice grounding yourself. And so you can do things like, let's figure out 5 things that you may look at that may calm you or relax you or make you happy. Maybe you can think of 4 things that you're feeling right then in that moment and acknowledge those. What are 3 things maybe you hear that help to relax you and pull you back? Is it jazz? Is it the sound of birds? Do you think about the sound of laughter maybe with your friends? Also, wow, what are some of the things I really love that smell so good to me? Oh, I love the smell of brownies. If you think about brownies, maybe I love the smell of cookies, or maybe I just need to light a candle, and that candle has this scent or aroma that relaxes me and makes me feel calm. Maybe it's something that you like to eat. Hey, okay, chocolate M&Ms make me feel good, so maybe I'll have a bag of M&Ms next to me. After I finish writing, I put that chocolate in my mouth, I start to feel so much better. So those are some things that they can do. Also, it always helps, never fails, take those slow, intentional breaths, the deep inhales, the exhales. Be intentional with your breathing. That helps to anchor you. It may be verbal anchoring. And when I say verbal anchoring, you may have to speak to yourself and say, Felicia, girl, you are safe. You're not in that place anymore. You are writing this. You are not reliving this. Okay? You're just writing it. Say that out loud. Hear yourself say it. Why? Because your body needs to know the difference. Your body needs to understand we are not back in this moment. We are not reliving it. We are only writing about it. We are just sharing what we have experienced, but we're not in it. And you may have to say that out loud to yourself. I am not back in this scary, dark, traumatic place. I'm just writing about it.
Well, Felicia, you've given out almost a smorgasbord of tools, because I was thinking about, sometimes the writing gets so heavy that, once you're done, you do have to ground yourself again so that you're not carrying that weight of what you've just written and experienced. But make sure I'm using what I experienced, because I won't live in it again. I was just experiencing it, so I don't carry that around with me throughout the day. And you talked about journaling, taking a break, maybe going walking. And if there, aromatherapy, and if you're a person that has sweet tooth, you may have some M&Ms or a piece of your favorite piece of chocolate or whatever. So again, what I'm hearing is that connection between reflection and intentionality. Because if I'm reflecting, then I'm going to know that when I come out of this writing process, I'm going to have to implement those 3 or 4 things and 5 things that helps me to re-anchor myself in the present, that lets me know that I'm safe. And so I think that you, like I said, you gave us a smorgasbord of different tools that writers can utilize. And of course, there are more that I know that you could share, but you gave us a good start here. Now, there are writers, though, who they step away and they tell themselves that they're only on a break, but they never return. You know how we are about them break, we're just taking a break, but they never return. How do you help someone recognize avoidance, and then how do you re-engage safely?
Okay, so re-engaging, I would say re-engaging has to be very gentle. It can't be just forced and pushed, because if you have to re-engage, that means you have disengaged,
Yes.
right? And
Mhm.
so you have to step back into it cautiously, carefully, and with awareness. So when you go back to that laptop or that notebook, just first of all, maybe read or reread over what you've written. Take your time and slowly look back over it. And you can reflect on it a little, but don't just dive into it and get stuck in it. Okay. So that's kind of maybe this, as they say, scan over the page, maybe
Mhm.
a little bit, because again, that's slowly you want to reconnect emotionally. Then I would say, don't start back with the most painful scene or the most painful traumatic moment. If you've already put it in that book, don't go back to that first. Maybe right around it, maybe start at another happier point or place or during that time. Also, you want to use what I call anchored prompts. And when I say anchored prompts, things like asking yourself, so what do I understand now that I didn't back then when that happened or occurred?
Mhm.
And what did that version of me need at that time when I was in that traumatic situation or going through that difficult journey? What did I need? That right there, when you start to think more about you, it helps you to anchor yourself. It's a form of self-love, because you have to pamper on yourself. You have to love on yourself to say, come on, self, take my hand. We're gonna walk back into this together. Come on, it's okay. I got you. And
Mhm.
everybody wants to hear that. Those words mean a lot when you're going through something. I got you. I'm with you. And so you have to say that to your own self.
Mhm.
So when you step back in, you also see it as, I'm not just stepping in, picking up where I left off. I am stepping back in, refueled, refreshed, I'm ready. And so all of that can be a form of support for you. So those are ways that you can, the writer can re-engage. Basically, think about stepping into it with your own self-support system before you start.
And I like that, Blish, because as you indicated, it's a form of self-love.
Mhm. Love
And
on yourself.
yeah, and it's like we have to have permission to do that. But that should be the first thing, because you
Mhm.
cannot really take care of anyone else until you take care of yourself. So I like
Absolutely.
the fact that we're really practicing my my phrasing. For you to try
Yes.
to take care of somebody else, make sure you take care of yourself first, because you got to, because nobody else can really understand the significance of what you're writing and what you are experiencing as you write it.
Exactly.
Not reliving it, but you're experiencing something on a cellular level as you're going through the writing process. So that leads me to, as you already hinted at, you're re-engaging. Don't go to the thing that could have triggered you, or that most, I'm gonna say, explicit moment. Don't go there first. Let's go somewhere else first. So
Right.
that leads me to, not every part of your story should be told at the same time. So
Mm.
how do you guide writers in deciding what they are emotionally ready to write now, right, to what they're emotionally ready to write at this moment versus what needs more time? Because I think sometimes, and I could be wrong, that when folks say, okay, I'm going to tell my story, they think that, because it is liberating to think that you're going to tell your story, but
Right.
you know you're going to tell your story, but there's a whole lot to your story, baby girl. What part do we really need to be telling? And I think sometimes, because our stories are so layered, it's hard to figure out what piece to peel back the layers of the onion and actually share with the audience. So how, because there's that emotional component. So how do you help them to navigate, just, which is really I guess it might be what you said, that has to be done before you get started. So how do we get that understanding about what part I'm going to be sharing?
I think when you start to write that you have to maybe do a bit of a self-assessment about what is really, really important. And again, what can be used as a tool to help someone instead of you writing it as though you're trying to get revenge or
Mhm.
it's vengeance writing. And so to do that, you may have to do a self-assessment. For example, you may have to think about the capacity of what you're writing.
Mhm.
When you write this, can you write it and still get up and move forward and do the things that you need to do? Or do you find yourself stuck in this emotional place of anger and rage or extreme fear or anxiety or frustration all over again and you can't function after that? If writing that down and putting that in there is doing that to you, then you need to decide, let me go back and look at this and read it and see, did I, again, like we talked about yesterday, did I write that from a place of being helpful or just from my own personal emotions where I spewed it out on someone else?
Mhm.
Because you don't want to do that. So you want to assess the capacity as to whether or not you are able to continue or do you need to take more time. I would also say number two, think about or assess the clarity of what it is that you're writing. Do you, as the aspiring author, do even you understand what you're writing? Or are you still just sitting inside of what you're writing?
Mhm.
Have you walked through that and you're at the point where you can be a help to someone? We have to go back to that. You got to clarify that. Or am I still just sitting inside this tragedy or this thing that aggravated me or frustrated me? And in doing so, sometimes we're aggravated and upset, and people say, slow down, wait a minute, I don't understand what are you saying? I don't understand, I don't get it. Because you can't write clearly
Mhm.
because you're upset. So look back at it and say, am I clear? Is there clarity here in what I'm writing for someone else that is going to read this? And then my final thing when it comes to assessments, I would say, are you being consistent? Be honest with yourself. Am I being consistent when I'm writing this? Am I avoiding something? Or am I honoring that I just need a little more space? Like I do need to just maybe step away and then come back. Or am I putting this down and walking away for 2 or 3 weeks or a month because I am just not ready to face that? I'm not ready to do that.
Mhm.
So, what point are you at? Are you at the point that you can say, I can write this, but I want to step back for maybe about 20, 25 minutes. I maybe want to turn on a little jazz and then I'm going to come back. So, you have to do that assessment with yourself as an aspiring author, thinking about publishing their true story. Now, don't get me wrong. If you need more time, that doesn't mean that you have dropped the ball or failed, but it means that you are realizing that I might need to step back for a couple of minutes. That's what we call emotional intelligence, knowing how to control your emotions and what direction they're going in. That is very important when you are writing your truth. Okay. And a lot of times you can't fully write that truth again the way that it needs to be as a tool for someone else until after you have healed, because it won't come out the same
Mhm.
if you're trying to write it while you're in the midst of whatever broke you or still dealing with whatever broke you.
Well, Felicia, for the
It's a
writer,
lot.
it is, and thank you. That's my lead. It's a lot. So it's a lot. So what help me? What does it look like to move forward with support instead of isolation? Because it's very easy to feel isolated in this process, that it's something wrong with you, but it's really part of the process, but I don't know it. I don't have the support. I mean, what does support look like? Help me. I don't know what to do. Can you help me?
Yeah, because when you start writing it, a lot of times once you talk to people, you may lose some people. They may drop off, and you may feel all alone trying to get this done. But that's where your storytelling becomes a form of responsibility. It is a responsibility that you have taken on when you decide to write your story, especially when it involves other people. You have to decide, first of all, okay, I'm going to take on this story writing and I'm going to be responsible for it. Am I writing to reveal something about somebody and show and tell and put out names and all that? Or am I writing as a way to heal and release to help myself? Or have I healed where now I can just share with other people to be a help? And so you may have to get a support system that looks like maybe a therapist. You may have to get a support system that maybe looks like a coach, even a writing coach to help you through it. You may have to find somebody you consider to be a confidant or an advisor to help you and to show support for what you're doing, because that's going to be important. Support is very impactful, or isolation, when you're trying to write your truth. Now, when it comes to isolation, you may feel I'm all alone. So even in that, I'm all alone, I'm upset about that. So are you writing and releasing without processing before you write? See that if you're doing it that way, that is a response of the isolation you feel, because now people are upset that you're telling your truth. Also with isolation, it can be, I want to say this and I want to tell it, but I don't know if they are going to understand that I need them to validate my feelings and to agree with me, and if you don't, what is that going to do for me? You know, you expect the audience to validate your healing, but that may not necessarily be the case. Also, the aftermath, the emotional aftermath of having written this, that can be a moment of isolation for you too, because a lot of people, depending on how you presented it, if you put factual names, dates, and very great descriptions of places, a lot of people may pull back from you. Family members may get upset.
Absolutely.
And so you have to deal with the emotional aftermath of that if you choose to do it that way, which I would go back to again. Would you really want to do it that way, or do you want to write it in a form where it is more of a tool and it doesn't look like a book of vengeance?
Yes.
It may be my truth, but is it vengeance more so than it is healing for you? You have to think about that, because it can bring about isolation from writing that. Your story may involve other people, but your healing, you can't let their response determine your healing point from that. If they don't agree with you, you can't say, I never can move forward because y'all don't understand and you won't accept what I'm telling you. They are not responsible for that. You are. You do what you got to do for yourself. You are responsible for you. You have to have support systems that exist outside those manuscript pages.
Well, Felicia, you made me feel a little bit more at ease as a writer who's never written this story, that doesn't really know how to get started, who may fear, if I tell too much, am I going to lose my family and my friends, their support, because what I'm getting is, and what I want the audience to understand is, you have to be very intentional and really sort of be methodical about how you approach this, so that not only are you not writing vengeance writing, but you're leaving the audience with a tool, but you have been left with a tool also, is the way I look at it,
Yes.
because that's another step in my continual healing. And so just balancing those two, I do agree that it does really take a village, because it's a lot and it's different for different writers.
Yeah, and in doing that too, you are teaching your own self basically how to survive after you tell them or after you write that book. You are teaching yourself through these steps and thinking these things out as you write, how to be responsible for yourself and how to survive if isolation comes, and how to survive when you need that support system by you. Because everything that's written, not everything that's written is you writing from a healed place, and then not everything that's felt should be written all at once. It may be that you need to step back and break it down.
Mhm.
Don't lose yourself in the process, basically.
Mhm.
Know how to
Well,
survive.
so don't lose yourself in the process. Make sure that you know how to survive
Right.
so that the cost of telling your story doesn't take you down.
Absolutely. Whether you get support or isolation, you've got to be able to be responsible for dealing with both. And so, again, that requires you asking yourself some questions as you prepare to write this, or if you're ready to do so.
All right, then. Well, guys, what we've heard today is that telling your story is not about release, it's about responsibility. And that's your responsibility for your healing, responsibility for your timing, responsibility for your capacity, because you may not
Yes.
have the capacity to do it all at one time, or you maybe won't be able to do but certain aspects of your story. But you're allowed to take the time to figure all that out. You're allowed to protect your peace. You're allowed to tell your story in a way that does not cost you yourself. Felicia, thank you for helping us
Thank you.
understand not just how to tell the story, but how to hold it. If you're listening and you realize that writing your story is requiring more of you than you expected, you don't have to navigate this alone. Felicia works with writers through her Aspiring Writers and Writers Workshop, helping them access their story in a structured, supported way. And once your story is on the page, I work with authors to refine and strengthen and elevate their writing so it communicates clearly and powerfully the message that they want to share. Now, if you're ready to move forward with guidance, this is the work we do. So stay connected to the series. This is where we move from simply telling stories to learning how to do it in a way that protects you and positions your voice with clarity. And to my audience, you know the drill. Before you go trying to take care of someone else, let's make sure we take care of ourselves first. Bye now.